Just before I call the public hearing to order, there are a number of chairs up here towards the front. If some of you at the back want to move forward and closer to the action. And I see faces in the audience that I don't know if they've been to public hearings before, but just to give you the overview. So once the public hearing is called to order, the administration will give a briefing on the subject at hand, which is the Bylaw 2017-29, the land use bylaw, opportunity for councillors to ask questions of clarification to administration, after which there's an opportunity for public submissions, verbal. And I will ask that people maintain respect and civility through that portion. And likely we'll alternate between those speaking in favor, those speaking opposed, and those speaking in a neutral manner. After everybody who wants to speak has had an opportunity, and I should note there's a 5-minute maximum, the municipal clerk will read into the record the names of those who have provided written submission. If necessary, there'll be final administrative comments, and then the public hearing will be adjourned. So with that, I'll call the public hearing to order.
Mr. Mayor, point of order, very short. Will you recognize?
Okay.
Thank you. I need some support for that overhead because I can't even write my name and so much. I will ask you, I'm sure everybody's attention.
Okay.
It's going to be.
Keep it over here for a second.
Here is going to be 1, 2.
Okay.
I thank you very much for recognizing me. Mayor Barrowman, without prejudice, I would like to raise a point of order on a matter of referring to tonight's public hearing on LUB 2017-29. This public hearing date contravenes Section 6065 of the General Municipal Government Act and Section 223. We can only put one, I realize. I wait for you. Section 6065 of the General Municipal Government Act and Section 223, which is a very important item here to back this thing up. Because we already been argued about this a few times with you, and you were present, or I was trying to put on objection some instances about that. To confirm the number of days required between the notice and a public hearing advertisement, I consulted with a number of experts everywhere, not only in Canmore, of course, and the conclusion was that the days allowed is not acceptable according to the bylaw. I trust you will come to the equitable solution to this problem by reconsidering the date of this public hearing. Let me just explain that. Please note the item in the box. And we've been discussing that last time when we were at Three Sisters on that, and the conclusion was that 5 days is enough.
Could you use the microphone, Mr. Kennedy? Could you use the microphone, Mr. Kennedy?
Oh, I'm sorry. I'm sorry. The point of order is, this has been a known fact, that the last paper comes out on Thursday sometime, and the public hearing is on Tuesday. I like to support, last time I wasn't successful on the objection, however, I like to support this by this document here, And this has been pointed out to me after 40 years involved in politics. I didn't realize that this is existing, and it was pointed out by professionals to me. And I draw your attention to this here. If this document is as important or more important perhaps, or equally important as an act, should that be not followed, I've been advised that this is another problem area what the town of Canmore could have. And here, thousands of people involved with this bylaw, and I would be sorry if we're not going to have a happy ending for this. And I trust, as you said, your very fair judgment on that, and you will make this thing move and go, this bylaw, so it will be sustainable without question. Thank you very much for your time. I can leave that on, or your staff will give you a right proper page for it, or if you discuss it with your staff, I leave that, and you will return it.
Mr. Fish?
The notice of tonight's public hearing has been advertised in the last 2 editions of the Rocky Mountain Outlook. So I would argue that we have likely both 12 and 5 days in advance of the meeting.
Would you mind sitting down, please, Mr. Kendi? Admin?
I have the online edition of the Outlook up, and it's on page 31 of the August 31st edition.
So Mr. Kendi's notice was that the notice of the meeting must be posted at least 5 days in advance of the meeting. From August 31st until today's date of September 12th, depending on how you count them, there is no less than 12 days there.
It's 2 consecutive weeks, sir. It's in the law.
And the newspaper, the notice was posted for 2 consecutive weeks in that newspaper.
Mr. Kendi, would you mind?
I'm sorry, very sorry.
Yes. Ms. Hyde, do you want to speak to the wording?
Sure. This section doesn't say that the final notice of a public hearing must be published at least 5 days before the meeting. It means the first notice of the public hearing needs to be posted at least 5 days before the public hearing. So as long as that first notice was published, we can publish every day if we like, if we had a daily paper, right up until the public hearing occurred.
So in summary, we feel confident that we've met the requirements of the Municipal Government Act.
Yes.
Thank you. In which case we'll move forward.
The letter that I received dated August 30th for the notice, signed by the supervisor of planning and development, it says that in the what is proposed section, refers to 2 land use districts which in fact don't exist: wildlife conservation and environmental district. The closest to this I could find in the land use bylaw was wildlands conservation and environment districts. So the description in the ad is incorrect, and those of us who got letters at home or in the newspaper don't have the correct information. And I understand that MGA section 606(6)A calls for the purpose of the bylaw or the public hearing be given to the public. And my contention is you have land use district that you're calling wildlife conservation, which does not exist. So, and that's in the letter.
I haven't been able to check that. It could be that a typo was made between wildlife and wildlands. I would encourage members of the public, if they are confused about the intent of it, we are happy to withdraw that portion of the bylaw at second and third reading and leave the lands in question under the current zoning, which allows for more development than what we had been proposing. So I would, no, that's fine. I don't need to know right now. Thank you. So I would look forward to hearing from the public, and if there's confusion on this matter, we'll return at second and third reading with potential amendments if there is a lack of clarity about what is being proposed.
You may see it. We'll move on then with the public hearing, administration briefing. Mr. Prevost.
Good evening, Council, members of the public. I'm Lee Prevost, the Supervisor of Planning and Development. Sorry, is that better now? Can you hear me now back there at the back? Okay. I'll speak loudly. Is that better? Yes. Thank you. So I'm Lee Prevost, the Supervisor of Planning and Development, and I'm representing the Planning Department this evening. As a background for tonight's public hearing, I want to give you a quick overview of the rationale behind what the proposed changes to the bylaw are. I mentioned this at first reading, but about a year ago, Canmore adopted a new municipal development plan that outlines 3 foundational values of sustainability, diversity, and connectedness. They're intended to formalize a commitment to protect the interests of future generations, to attract a wide range of people to our town, and to foster a shared sense of belonging in our community. This bylaw update is part 1 of 2, intended to better align the land use bylaw with this MDP. The proposed changes are identified in 4 schedules representing green building regulations, accessory dwelling units, simple land use bylaw amendments themselves, and the actual format of the bylaw. Originally, employee housing was to be included in this update, but we've postponed it to provide an opportunity to refine our concepts and to allow greater consultation on the potential impacts. Similarly, Steep Creek guidelines were to be adopted. However, we are awaiting final mapping expected this fall, so updates to these 2 sections can be expected as part of phase 2. This is a quick summary of the stakeholder consultation to date. In advance of today's public hearing, we've held open houses on August 2nd and 29th. We've held 3 meetings with BODA, the Bow Valley Builders and Development Association, on the 3rd, 14th, and 16th of August. We've had an online survey open for the last 2 weeks, and it closed at 4 p.m. today. And we've continued to receive phone calls and email feedback in response to information that we've had posted and updated on the town's website. The overlying question we've been asking is how might any of these proposed changes affect members of our community? The intent being to uncover opportunities that may not yet have been identified and to ensure that any unidentified consequences are mitigated where possible. We'll couple what we hear this evening with feedback from these previous events, and where we can, we'll improve upon our proposals, and where we are not able to, we'll identify the challenges. Our final recommendations will be presented at second reading to Council on October 3rd. The first schedule we're looking at is green building regulations, and the new MDP provides specific guidance with respect to environmental stewardship. Recognizing that Canmore is the gateway to Banff National Park, includes and is surrounded by several provincial parks, and is the setting for critical wildlife habitat and corridor connectivity. The MDP includes goals and policies intended to protect natural landscapes and wildlife, and to commit Canmore to being a leader in sustainable practices that protect the environment. With that lens, One of the targets for us is for all new buildings to meet minimum green building standards and to offer incentives for developments that exceed those minimums. We're updating the green building requirements because a year ago, Alberta introduced a new building code. That code introduced a new energy code intended to reduce greenhouse gas emissions in our province and to lower the demand for energy resources. It did so by introducing minimum energy consumption targets for building envelopes, lighting, heating, and hot water. At the same time, Natural Resources Canada, or NRCan, updated their EnerGuide program, which is the foundational element of Canmore's green building program. It switched from using a rating scale to summarize how energy efficient a house might be to forecasting the actual amount of energy that a rated home should consume to operate for 1 year. It also introduced a reference house, or a house that's designed only to meet the minimum building code without sustainability upgrades to show a baseline of energy consumption for comparison. Our proposed regulation would require energy consumption for new houses in Canmore to be 10% better than that EnerGuide reference house. We're including updates to incentives and penalties that are designed to encourage developers to meet this target. The average incentive or penalty would be in the range of about $300 to $1,200, and that would be based on a construction cost of $750,000. Fees are calculated as a percentage of construction costs, so the fees may vary slightly depending on the project. We've laddered our incentives and penalties in order to recognize performance being 10% better, 20% better, 30% better than the reference house. For large-scale residential, commercial, industrial, and institutional projects where the EnerGuide program does not apply, we're looking to the Model National Energy Code to be used as a baseline target. These types of developments will be required to exceed the baseline target by 25%, and similar to the housing program, they'll be incentivized and penalized based upon their building's performance in relation to that baseline target. Most of the requirements for green buildings aren't changing. Minimum energy requirements have been in place since 2010, and incentives and penalties have been part of that program for the entire period. The current requirements for meeting targets are also being slightly relaxed while we evaluate the impacts of the changes to the Energy Code and the EnerGuide program. In 2018, those fees will be reevaluated and updated to ensure that they are incenting sustainable development in a way that keeps Canmore, a leader in green building. Current requirements to have a blower door test prior to occupancy remain the same, and developers will still be able to work within their existing relationships with certified energy advisors and qualified professionals in meeting these green building requirements. Our meetings with BODA have been very productive, and they consider our targets to be reasonable, and they show support for laddering the penalties and incentives as a way to acknowledge better performance. They support penalties matching incentives to maintain consistency in how developments are evaluated. And BODA has made some good suggestions on how we can clarify our bylaw descriptions to make these penalties and incentives easier to understand, and as well suggesting tweaks to the targets to ensure that we have accurate baselines. The second area that we are reviewing is accessory dwelling units, also known as secondary suites, garden suites, and garage suites. The MDP provides clear direction that affordable housing is the most complex and challenging issue facing Canmore. Let me be clear. This bylaw is not about if suites should be allowed. The MDP has already given us that direction. It's about the best way we can encourage more suites to be developed in all areas of town. Areas within walking distance of the town center, commercial and mixed-use areas, and those in proximity to transit stops are singled out as being particularly attractive for new units. Why are we updating these? Well, in 2015, Canmore's Community Housing Corporation, CCHC, completed an accessory suite study that highlighted several results. First, that accessory dwelling units are one of the most feasible options for increasing affordable housing, for contributing to diversity in Canmore's housing types, and for introducing marginally higher densities to existing communities. The study also recommended that the town look for ways to remove land use bylaw barriers to new accessory suites, and do so through the use of a grant program, by looking for tax incentives, by reducing fees at the development permit and building permit stages, by approving variances to bylaw requirements, and specifically to relax parking requirements in neighborhoods within reasonable walking distance of town amenities and areas with local transit. With that MDP and CCHC guidance, we're proposing to expand the areas where accessory dwelling units are permitted to include all single-family and duplex properties in residential districts. We're proposing to eliminate the requirement that those properties have access to both streets and laneways. We're looking to remove the requirement for property owners to be a resident of one of the units. We're seeking relaxed parking within 1 kilometer of town center or 450 meters of a transit stop, while introducing a new requirement to include protected bicycle stalls. And we're looking to simplify requirements around size, design, and landscaping with a focus on preventing unnecessary impacts to adjacent neighbors' enjoyment of their own properties. As development permits are currently not required for single-family and duplex residents, we want to remove development permit requirements for accessory suites contained within those projects. Development permits will still be required for detached garden suites and garage suites. Since 1998, accessory dwelling units have been permitted in new residential subdivisions. And in 2012, zones that allowed suites were expanded to include established residential areas that were served by both streets and laneways. Construction costs still remain the most significant barrier to new accessory suite development, with a range of $5,000 to $50,000 to develop a new attached unit like a basement suite, and a range of $50,000 to $250,000 for a new detached suite. These barriers are reflected in the startlingly small number of accessory suites completed since the last bylaw update in 2012. We've had 17, or an average of 3 per year. Even with the changes we are proposing, there's little evidence that we will see an explosion of new accessory dwelling units in Canmore. What we hope to see is an increase from the trickle that we're currently experiencing. From the feedback we've collected over the last 6 weeks, the majority view is that accessory suites are a positive housing form for Canmore. There's also strong support that suites provide rental flexibility, are a welcome source of additional income to help mitigate the high costs of housing in Canmore, and that they provide places to live for family members. There are concerns around the potential for for accessory dwelling units to be used as short-term tourist home rentals, the potential to add to existing on-street parking problems, and that rental tenants appear disrespectful to existing community members. Most respondents agree that design elements are needed to respect the impacts to adjacent neighbors, and we found that there's an even mix of support and opposition to proposed parking relaxations. The third schedule we're looking at are proposed changes that will clarify bylaw sections that may have been perceived as ambiguous in the past. Our focus is on ensuring that the bylaw is easy to understand, that our current practices in interpreting the bylaw are explicit in the clauses, that we're consistent in the terms that we use, that we remove clauses that are duplicated somewhere else in the bylaw, and that we correct errors that we've come across over the last 5 years. We also want to ensure that we improve alignment with the land use bylaw with its guiding document, the Municipal Development Plan. Some of the significant changes we are proposing include updating 9 sites from mostly developable zones to a mix of public use, municipal reserve, environmental districts, and wildlife corridor to reflect planning directions outlined in the MDP. There are no proposed developments for any of these sites at this time. Rather, we want to better clarify the limited use that is intended for these sites. In all cases, the proposed zoning is more restrictive than that which is being replaced. We want to strengthen fire protection regulations to better protect Canmore from future wildfire events. We want to update flood mitigation requirements to incorporate lessons that we've learned since 2013 and to ensure that there is consistency in how we apply those lessons. And as the MDP is forward-oriented, we want to encourage a variety of streetscape design options that help protect the feeling of community in certain areas, that provide comfortable pedestrian and cycling experiences, and will do so by limiting access on some roadways. About 10% of Canmore's residential roads have both street and laneway access. For those limited areas, we want to restrict driveway locations to the alley only. What hasn't changed? No existing land use districts are being updated. No new land use districts are being introduced. And there are no changes to the methods we utilize in planning to interpret the bylaw. We've heard some concern from residents in the Van Horn and Peaks of Grassy neighborhoods that the proposed zoning changes may allow development such as hospitals, schools, campgrounds, cemeteries. Our goal, to be clear, is to further restrict development opportunities on these sites, not to introduce new uses. But these are the districts that are currently available for us to accomplish that goal. In our Phase 2 updates in 2018, we intend to clarify the uses in those districts that we're changing to specifically reflect the more restrictive approach that we intend for these sites. We've had consultation with BODA members on this, and they've also pointed out, while working through our flood and fire mitigation sections, that we could use further clarification that ensures consistency in the interpretation of those amendments and make sure that we arrive at good outcomes. The last schedule we're changing, and I'll do this one quickly, is really just format changes to how the bylaw is presented. Similar to the last section, we're not introducing any new material. We're simply rearranging the order of the sections to make them more logical and to have them follow the order in which development typically occurs. This is an example of our current Section 4 general regulations. And this is the proposed change. As you can see, it's mostly reordering the section. It's showing where we've previously added clauses to the land use bylaw that should have fallen under these general regulations, but that have resided elsewhere, could potentially lead to important considerations being overlooked. With this format, relevant clauses will be contained within the appropriate sections, hopefully leading to more clarity during design interpretation. So that concludes our overview. Thank you for listening, and we're happy to take any questions.
Thank you very much. The council for questions. I have a question just to try to recall the process in 2011 and 2012 prior to the previous change around secondary suites to the land use bylaw under Mayor Casey's last council. So that was approved in early 2012.
Yes.
And there were some open houses and other engagement processes through 2011. Mr. Fish, do you remember all of that?
Yes, that's correct. So initially, a bylaw was created in 2008 to look at just the secondary suite aspect of it. There was some community engagement, some research conducted, and then at the direction of council, it was rolled into a large land use bylaw update that was underway, implementing some of the work from signposts to sustainability. So in 2010 and 2011, there were a number of open houses and surveys conducted. Some of those were held at both here at the Civic Center, but also at the high school and middle school in town as well. And there was certainly a variety of opinions, and some were very supportive, and there were some concerns raised as well about the introduction of secondary suites into some R1 neighborhoods. In the end, Council approved that on January 3rd of 2012, and that forms the bylaw that we have now.
So those conversations, the initiative led by that council in 2008 would have been coming just after the whole Mining the Future vision and presumably taking some direction from the vision?
That's correct. So Mining the Future, I believe, was completed in 2006, and that led towards a fair bit of work in the, at that time, the Community Sustainability Plan, which in the end was basically retracted. But coming out of that at Council's direction, the Signpost to Sustainability document was adopted, and that included guidance to include secondary suites as an option.
And that was in Signpost to Sustainability in 2008?
It's a policy document from around 2008, 2009, building on the Community Sustainability Plan work, yes.
So at that time, Council opened up the possibility for secondary suites in certain neighborhoods. Do you happen to know how many residential units were affected by that change?
According to some research that has been done recently, I think it was in around about 400 properties were eligible for suites under the current regulations. And as Mr. Prevost alluded to, since that time we've had 17 approved.
Thank you. Councillor McCallum?
Thank you, Your Worship. Thank you for your presentation. So I'll speak up, I promise. I can be loud if I need to. So in developing accessory suites in homes, not only is there a land use bylaw requirement, there's also a Alberta Building Code requirement, correct? Which sort of speaks to why the expense may be the range of expense that you're speaking of in your presentation. Can you describe that more, please?
That's correct. The building code requires life safety elements to be incorporated to any development. So when we add a secondary suite into a home or as a garage or garden suite, it has to have several things. One, it has to have full fire separation from the existing unit, which means a certain level of fire protection over and above what you would see typically in your normal home. It also has to have independent HVAC system, heating, ventilation, and air conditioning system. You put those two elements together and you've added significant cost to any development.
So it's not necessarily, if somebody wants to develop a suite in their basement, not necessarily an add water and stir sort of proposition.
It is more complex than that.
Yes,
Yes.
thank you. Could you describe for me the reasoning behind the 450 meters that we're using from transit stops, where that element of distance comes from?
That element comes from our discussions with engineering on what a reasonable distance to walk is that would encourage the use of public transit. 600 meters is considered the norm in most municipalities that are larger. We've chosen purposefully 450 meters to ensure that we do get good uptake in transit use if we're relaxing that parking.
Perfect. Thanks very kindly.
Thank you.
Councillor Russell?
Thank you. Just, Mr. Prevost, back to something Mr. Fish commented on. Signpost for sustainability was adopted for what purpose? Can you just refresh my memory? I thought it was just adopted for information.
I would have to check the exact motion. It was intended as a document. I can't remember the wording if it was for planning purposes, but
yeah, just when you say it was adopted, I seem to be remembering it that it was a compilation and it never really had any standing, just other than information, a compilation of the research. And when you suggest it's adopted, that could be confusing.
yeah, I don't disagree. I think the important point is that the council of the day made the decision to allow the secondary suites in the land use bylaw, which, as you point out, is the more regulatory document.
Councillor Krausert?
Your Worship. I'm just wondering, with regards to the 9 parcels that are going to be rezoned, with regards to the concerns about that, is it possible to put some language in this amendment that says that there will be no development on these properties, and then that would change when the new zone comes through?
The short answer is no. The proposal before council eventually would be to classify those parcels, or to rezone those parcels or redesignate them under existing districts. And there are other areas. So for example, where a parcel is proposed to go to a public use district, the hospital, the existing hospital is also covered under that district, I'm fairly certain. So to change that district as part of the amendment would turn the hospital into a non-conforming. So we could change it to a different land use district, but as Mr. Prevost alluded to, there's no perfect district for those uses.
So let me rephrase. What I heard was that there would be a new description of new districts coming in 2018 that would better describe the use for those areas. Is there some interim language that can be used to give life to the intent that is on those parcels right now, and that's being that they're not going to be turned into a campground or something else?
Council would have to create a specific new land use district, a direct control district on those parcels for that purpose. So what we were proposing to do is to use existing land use districts that are the best fit based on what the intent for those is. And so it would take a significant amendment to change that.
So let me ask another way then. Is there a reason that they need to be renamed now that justifies doing it before that new district is created? Or could it wait till the new district?
This was largely in response to council and requests from the public regarding the existing zoning on these parcels. So administration was trying to respond to that. I understand there have been a number of calls and questions about some of the uses that are allowed within the districts that are proposed, even though those are significantly less in every case than the current zoning allows. Right, so it was in response to council direction coming out of the issue at 990 Wilson Way, and some concerns from largely Peace de Gracie residents around the UR.
Yeah, because it was cleaning up a few of those parcels and make sure
that's right. There is no need to do this, and to strike that amendment from the proposed bylaw, there is virtually no consequence to that. It just means there's more development available on those lots should ownership change.
Okay, good, thank you.
Councillor Sanford.
Thank you, Worship. Thank you, Mr. Prova, for the presentation. I had a really specific question about one of the clauses in the accessory dwelling unit. Can I refer to it right now?
Sure.
I know you don't have it right in front of you, but it's
I might be able to find it.
4.5.03 B, and it says, an entrance to the accessory dwelling unit that is secondary to and separate from the principal use and may be from a common indoor landing or directly from the exterior of the structure, and shall have direct access to private outdoor amenity space. So I'm envisioning that you can have a accessory suite in like a split level house where you go down into the basement. Is that like a single entrance where it splits on a landing? Is that like a bi-level house or a?
Yes, that would be a bi-level house. So
you come in on one level and the primary residence is upstairs and the secondary suite is downstairs?
Correct, yes.
And then it says, have direct access to private outdoor amenity space. Now, does that mean you come back through that landing, or do you need to have access through the unit into outdoor space?
It means once you come out through that landing into the outdoor space, there's actually space designated for that secondary suite. It's not shared with the primary residence. So on the outdoors.
You can use that landing as the access to that
Yes, that's
secondary.
correct.
So you can come out your landing, go to the backyard, and that's your private space, and the resident has the front yard as the private space, is that?
That's right.
So we're dividing it like that?
Not necessarily front and back. That's a good example.
Yeah.
It could be split in the backyard into two sections. There are a variety of ways to do it.
Okay,
Think
so,
sort of like a balcony on an apartment building. That's considered outdoor amenity space. So it can be small or large, but it has to be designated for that secondary, that accessory dwelling unit.
so that, their private space is outdoors, and it's only their space, and it's not shared with the,
That's correct, yeah.
okay, all right. So it's just the entrance that's shared.
That's right.
Okay, thank you.
I have a question around section 4.5.0.2B, which is direction that accessory dwelling units shall not be used as visitor accommodation or tourist home. And this is a concern in the community and at council and with administration. If you could just speak briefly to the initiative we've started just recently on enforcement of illegal short-term rentals and how you might see that playing out in the near future and affecting what may result from this direction.
Certainly. There's essentially three elements to our enforcement program around tourist homes, illegal use of tourist homes. The first we started this summer, which was an education program to let everyone in Canmore understand where they are allowed, where they are not allowed, and what the fine system, what the penalty system is for that. 2 months on, we've now, tomorrow we will start our first enforcement phase, which is where we will be issuing cease use orders and fines. Shortly after that, if there is non-compliance, we will be going to a violation ticket, which is a provincial requirement to appear in court where subsequent penalties can be assigned by a judge. So that's the enforcement program we started right now. I think it works well in tandem with accessory dwelling units because that enforcement program is how we can ensure that these are utilized for the intent of which we're making these changes.
And the penalties for those infractions, I think Mr. Fish said today, $2,500 for the first offense?
That's right, they're significant. $2,500 for the first offense, $5,000 for every subsequent one. And that could apply to every day after the first offense that it's continuing to be used in that manner.
Thank you. One other question I have is just around, did planning do any comparisons of other municipal land use bylaws that give similar direction? Are we inventing a new beast here, or is this something you've looked at with other municipalities?
Outside of cases that are specific to Canmore alone, we've looked at a variety of other planning departments, other municipalities, including Vancouver, Calgary, and Edmonton. Also some of the smaller ones in Alberta, Cochrane, Turner Valley.
Thank you. Are there any other questions at this time from members of council? Seeing none, thanks very much, Mr. Prevost.
Thank you.
This time we'll move into the public submissions, so I'll invite people to the front to speak, give their perspective on the proposed changes to the land use bylaw. I'll ask that you identify, well, your name. Is there something to write names down? Okay, just speak your name. Identify whether you're speaking in support, opposed, or in a neutral fashion, and respect the 5-minute rule. Thank you. Yes.
Thank you. My name is Wade Fleske. My wife and I and my 2 daughters live on 2nd Street. And for the record, we oppose the amendment by the Municipal Development Plan. As we live in an R1 district, we made an economic decision to purchase that home accordingly. We feel our rights under this proposal are being infringed upon. That being said, we have spent time with with the planning department, with Audrey, among others, trying to understand both sides of the position. And so as a result of that, we have the further comments with respect to a number of the proposals. First of all, with respect to maximum use unit size, the current proposal suggests that they would take the square meters from 50 square meters up to 75 square meters. It's our contention that this should be discouraged. It should stay at 50. Simple math would suggest that at $200 a square foot, total unit construction of about $150,000, as the planning department also agreed with, that type of an investment is not recoverable with the mandate under the NDP, which is affordable housing. That means you're going to be getting Airbnb, or you're going to be getting people paying a lot more rent. That is not affordable housing. If you keep the garden suite smaller, then you can accomplish perhaps your mandate of affordable housing, but keeping it bigger does not. Lot coverage, it's adamant, or it's our view, and we're adamant about it, that it's not to exceed the 40% of total lot size. This will allow for retention of trees, foliage, and others, and maintain the aesthetics of the neighborhood. Parking, 1 stall should be included per garden unit. We have cars littered all over 5th Avenue, 6th Avenue, 2nd Street as a result of illegal Airbnbs and illegal roommate suites already. We also further contend that the parking should be included in the 40% lot size calculation. Spatial consideration should also be paramount. There's a cul-de-sac over here by Rocky Mountain Pizza where there's 3 garden suites right next to each other. That is not the intention that I believe council is trying to accomplish with the municipal development plan. Spatial considerations like there are with bed and breakfasts should be considered so that the integrity of the neighborhoods are maintained. Enforcement has to be paramount. We have illegal suites, we have illegal rooms, we have illegal Airbnbs. I have already provided notice to Kyle in the enforcement department of illegal rooms and garden suites on our street. And after 3 or 4 conversations, including yesterday, he still has got back to me and says they haven't made a decision on what to do about it. That type of enforcement, if we're going to go through with this, can't continue. It has to be prudent, and we have to be able to rely upon it. Finally, I think that if we are going to have these garden suites, there should be a just property tax assessed to them, and that property tax should go to accordingly to enforcement. Thank you.
Thank you very much. Anyone would like to speak in support of the proposed changes land use bylaw?
Good evening, Your Worship and councillors. My name is Lawrence Hill. Starting with the ADUs, I certainly support the initiative that council has taken in this regard. It not only increases or has the potential to increase the rental inventory in town, but also will help to make new basement suites legal and encourage hopefully some owners of illegal basement suites to convert their suites. As you know, a couple of years ago, we came up with the concept of a legal suite in a duplex. So I definitely encourage that the concept. I do think, though, in existing areas that there should be an owner required to occupy one of the 2 units. It could be a secondary home for that person, but still then you would have some on-site management, if you will. It was interesting when I read the definitions of accessory dwelling unit that I didn't have to be reminded. I think I was reading it almost the same day in Seattle, or the community immediately north of Seattle, Shoreline. One of my sons is in the process of buying a house there, it was advertised as a legal duplex. In fact, it wasn't. It was an accessory dwelling unit, and there the wording, the definition is almost identical to here, except that ownership is required. For existing units, to encourage conversion, I think that you should look seriously at, and within the ability, obviously, or within the confines of the building codes, a manner in which you can allow the owner to, for a reasonable cost, $10,000 as opposed to 50 or more if they're doing all of the compliance requirements that Lee referred to. So if they are complying with the major things like parking and the separate entrance, that they would be able to do, have significant things that would, provide, if you could quantify it, 80% of the safety. So fire-rated barrier between, interconnected fire alarms. So if a fire is going off in the suite, people upstairs find out about it, or vice versa. And that's very similar to the requirements in Seattle. So you could have a house, and for a reasonable cost, they can convert it. Somebody comes out, confirms that that 1 or 2 or 3 of these things have been met, and yet it's not totally code compliant. The idea of not requiring development permits, I quite agree with, although I think there should be a mandatory requirement upon 1-year renewal that public input could be received, so that if there were problems that the neighborhood was having to put up with, then the administration would be aware of it at that time, and they could take appropriate action. For the detached accessory dwelling units, I think that the height should be probably another foot higher, or 0.3 meters than what was proposed. Not a big deal, but I think it's there. And going back to my previous comment about owner occupancy, I do think that the way it's proposed would be fine in new areas. That way people going in would do so with their eyes open and know that they could be living next to a unit where there's renters upstairs and downstairs. Frontage, I think, is a little tight for requiring a 40% landscaping. I think it should be really reduced to 35%. Not a major deal, but I've looked at an actual example, and it's tight with trying to meet the parking requirements.
25 seconds left.
Okay. Green building requirements, I generally agree with the initiatives that are being taken there. And again, I would encourage a 1-year renewal or 1-year mandatory review to see how they have performed after the first year.
Thank you.
Questions? No. Thank you.
Thank you. Does anybody care to speak in a neutral fashion?
I speak quietly, so I'm going to have to be really close. Can you hear me? Council and fellow people that are here.
I'm sorry, I didn't get your name, sir.
Oh, David Folks Jones. I'm in 609 2nd Street, Canmore, South Canmore. I'm fully aware of what the intent is, and I've given it thought, and I've actually submitted some suggestions to council. But one thing, first off, like, are we really addressing the problem? Like, a short time ago, me and 6 buddies, we got subsidies from the province. We constructed 24-suite apartments. For every second suite had to be low income tested. Like you go to towns like Innisfail, Bonnyville, Lacombe, there's all kinds of rental apartments. We don't have any. I think Banff has one. And I wonder if we shouldn't have a different direction and look at getting subsidies from the province for developing affordable, not affordable housing, but affordable rentals. See, there's too much money made in this town by knocking down a house that four young people are in, and then putting up a fourplex. And so we don't have any low rental apartments. And on-site parking, I believe there should be on-site parking on these garden suites. What happens if somebody goes away for 6 weeks? Is a car just going to sit there? Like what is Canmore's bylaw for the maximum time a car can be parked on a street? Compliance and surveillance. When I went to the meeting, I was told that we had, I think August 25th, I was told that there wasn't sufficient manpower to do any surveillance. Well, if we have secondary suites or garden suites, there'll be additional property taxes, and this should go to assist in compliance, surveillance, and enforcement. And I'm not sure the property taxes, maybe some of it should be set aside, the additional property taxes from garden suites, maybe it should be set aside for assisting in building an apartment or something. I'm pretty sure Banff has done that. And I, as far as the 450 meters, I think that's sort of a little bit of pie in the sky. All the garden suites we have in our area, all the young people get in their car and they go do their plumbing job, their electrical job, I'm not sure. But anyway, those were just considerations I had. But one of the biggest ones is rental apartments. Like, we don't have any. Like 6 of us built 48 suites in Edmonton with government subsidies and very reasonable rents. And it's doable, I think, and it's an alternative to garden suites. And that's all I have to say. Thank you very much for listening. And
thanks for your input. I just want to make a note. We just opened a 48 unit rental property at the end of last year in Three Sisters, affordable rental, and there's a 150 unit apartment rental building. Yeah. Groundbreaking next week. Yeah, that's excellent. Yeah,
and was there any subsidy from the government or?
No, that's that project is entirely owned and developed by Northview REIT, which is a large corporation, Canadian corporation, and as well we approved last year some. There's another 90-unit apartment building that's proposed next to the Coast Hotel. So, to your point, we do need more long-term rental market rentals,
and especially low rental. That's anyway. Thank you very much.
Thank you. Someone would like to speak now in opposition.
I have my own alarm that's going to go off to tell me to take some pills in a second here. So, Mayor Barman and Council, my name is Martin Buckley, and I'm a permanent full-time resident of the town of Canmore. My wife and I purchased property on Miscow Close in 2004, and we built our home thereon over the course of the next year. We've lived in that home continuously since 2005, and I note that Miscow Close is currently zoned R1BW. Within the town's land use bylaw, section 6.2.5.1, the R1B zoning requirements indicate that 15 specific lots out of the 36 properties on the close are to have secondary suites, which is a ratio or a percentage not far from 50% of the properties there. This seems to be an appropriate allowance for this part of Canmore, but more importantly, This was accepted by those people purchasing property on the close, back when they purchased. They understood that there were lots there that were going to have secondary suites. They had to live with that, they agreed, and they purchased their property. I'm opposed to any further density increases in the remaining R1B properties on Miscow Close, being those that are not currently required to have secondary suites. And in short, I just request that Council make no further changes to Section 2.6 of the current land use bylaw that would allow secondary suites, or as you're calling them, accessory dwelling units, on those lots, on those R1B lots, not specified in the current Section 2.6.5.1 of the land use bylaw. I'll spare you the rest of my rant. I think my opposition is good enough. Thank you for the time.
Thank you, Mr. Buckley. Is there anyone who would like to speak in support of the land use bylaw changes?
Good evening, Council. My name is Jessica Carpat. I'm here to represent Three Sisters Mountain Village and provide some information that you may not currently have in front of you. We are here in support of the redesignation of 1 Van Horn being redesignated to the public use district. I thought that maybe I could share some information that may help you and give some assurance to the public that there is a restrictive covenant registered on this parcel. It prohibits development of residential nature, and we do support the redesignation to the public use district. We are also in support of secondary suite changes in developing areas of TSMB, and that's a nuance that I wanted to make clear. So we do understand that there are purchasers in Three Sisters that have purchased with understanding what their intent of the parcel will be, but so we're not speaking on their behalf. We are only speaking on behalf of areas that are under development or will be in development in the future. We support them as it opens up the market to a larger group of families that could then be able to be a purchaser of a duplex or a single family dwelling. CMHC now allows the rent accumulated from secondary suites to be calculated as part of the mortgage and as part of the income of the financing opportunity. And so we see that as a good opportunity to increase affordability in Canmore. So thank you very much. I'm here if there are any questions.
Thank you.
Okay.
Is there anyone else who'd like to speak in a neutral fashion? I think there's somebody coming up. Oh, hold on, don't all fight over the...
Members of council, my name is Doug Protz. I am one of those guys that tear down fourplexes and build buildings. I guess it's not really a for or against, it's just more of a clarification. I was hearing that Build Green offers incentives to builders who meet or sorry, exceed the Build Green standards, and it's been like that since 2010. I'm pretty sure most of my projects have exceeded those standards by at least 10%, probably 30 or 40 units. I've never received $1 of incentive for that Build Green. So I'm just curious how I go about getting incentives. I'm pretty sure everybody at the town knows that I exceed those minimum standards because I have to pay money to get reports sent to the town to document what my standards are and what I've done. So this little talk of offering $300 for an incentive to beat it by 10%, I'll say it doesn't really matter because there's been no follow through on that. And really, if I got to spend 10 or 20,000 to get a $300 incentive, I'm not going to do it. Having said that, it's always been my philosophy that I like building green, and I don't do it for incentives. I do it because I want to. So putting a whole bunch more red tape in front of us when we're building to get a $300 or a $1,200 incentive is just like a painful waste of time. It really is. I think people like myself, Distinctive Homes, many other builders in town, they build green because they want to. There are some I'm sure do not want to, but waving a $300 or $500 or a $1,000 carrot in front of us isn't going to get us to change our philosophy. We build green because we want to. So I don't know if that's a for or against, but it's just a comment. Just one other quick thing is this rear lane access to properties. There's many properties downtown, R4 properties, which I happen to have a few of. I'm not sure what the direction is of that for allowing access to these properties. If they're looking to change this bylaw to remove access from the front of the properties, that'll create obviously many problems on R4 properties. What I guess I don't understand is if you're trying to encourage additional suites and density, why would you all of a sudden introduce in the bylaw that you cannot access an R4 property from not only the street and the lane, thus reducing density? If that's the case, if that happens, that's fine. I'll just take all my R4 properties that I have and just turn them into duplexes, reducing density, increasing cost. So I think, like I say, I'm not speaking for or against, I'm just don't totally understand where some of this stuff is going. Thank you.
Thank you. This time I'll invite someone who'd like to speak in opposition.
Thank you, Council and Mayor. My name is Gary Dudinsky. I've been a resident of Canmore for 26 years. Thank you for the opportunity to speak against the land use bylaw for secondary suites as currently written. Along with my wife, we own our own home in an R1 neighborhood with a front driveway. I bought there because I wanted the look, feel, and character of an R1 neighborhood, not an increased density or multi-density look, feel, and character of perhaps an R2, 3, or etc. neighborhood. If the current bylaw goes ahead, it will be rare for a true R1 neighborhood to exist in Canmore. With the current proposed changes, my neighborhood look, feel, and character will be destroyed due to increased density, lack of property or parking, and reduced property values. I already put up with B&Bs, secondary suites, staff housing, which is needed, but it's a major parking issue, and also non-permitted business vehicle parking on street. This has changed the look, feel, and character of my neighborhood in a negative way, and is not the intent of an R1 neighborhood. The bylaw, as currently written, does not require on-site parking if within 450 meters of a bus stop. I believe this is ridiculous. My street currently has a bus route on it since the service started. It is being removed September 22nd due to lack of demand, I presume. This change was supported by the town. Please keep in mind that there's a notable working population in town that does not work in Canmore, or they don't live, nor people don't live within a reasonable walking distance of a bus stop. The majority of these people need a vehicle to get to and from work, and thus a place to park it at their residence. Also keep in mind that no matter how much council wants to reduce vehicle use, the fact remains, in my neighborhood, B&Bs, secondary suites, and staff housing bring increased vehicle use and thus increased parking demands. Should council go ahead with this bylaw as written, I recommend the following changes. Allowing secondary suites in new neighborhoods and those with, that are currently allowed with rear access lanes. Increase the minimum lot size to 700 square meters. Include mandatory on-site parking for all residents of the home in question. drop the requirement of no parking related to the distance of bus stops, and also institute a substantial reduction of the town portion of the property taxes for those who don't have secondary suites due to the inconvenience and destruction of the look, feel, and character of an R1 neighborhood. This could be made up by charging higher property taxes to those who have secondary suites because they have financial gain to be made. The town has previously set a precedent of permanently reducing property taxes as an example for inconvenience of R1 properties bordering industrial areas. This has always been applied to my property for the last 26 years as I border an industrial area. But when I bought my home, I knew I was bordering an industrial area and accepted this up front. In summary, do not allow the current proposed land use bylaw to go ahead as written. It would destroy the look, feel, and character of existing R1 neighborhoods. Thank you for the opportunity to speak.
Thank you, sir. Anybody would like to speak now in support?
Got to bring the microphone down a bit for me here. Okay, so I'm Miranda Rosen, and I'm here actually on behalf of the Canmore Young Adults Network. And I'm not here to talk to you guys.
I'm sorry, I missed your name.
Miranda Rosen, and I'm here with the Canmore Young Adult Network. And I'm not here to talk to you guys today about technicalities and bylaws and rules and regulations, but I'm more so here to paint you guys a picture and give you a whole bunch of hypotheticals. So let me ask you a question and pose this question for everybody. What makes Canmore Canmore? What makes a community a community? Is it the mountains and the trees, or is it the local smoothie shop? And is it being able to walk down the sidewalk and know every person that you walk by? Because to me, a sense of community is having that community between all of the people here. And that's what makes Canmore Canmore. But what happens if, say 30 years from now, all of the young people who are growing up, they all graduate university, they grow up, and now they have to get a job and they have to move out from their homes? The odds are that they're going to be faced with the choice of either staying at home or they may have to leave Canmore because it's so expensive to live here. And what happens when 30 years from now, all those people leave Canmore, all those young people growing up leave Canmore, and what's left of the community? Is there going to be any community when all of the young people who are growing up move away? Or what will happen to this town, or any town for that matter? So I'll give you a little bit of an insight. Maybe this is more information than I need to share, but I'm 22 years old. I just finished university, and I'll be honest, I have a pretty good paying job, but my rent is $1,500 a month. It's the only place that I could find here, and that does not include any utilities. So the first of every month, $2,300 is vacuumed out of my account. And that doesn't include gas or groceries or anything else. And so, yes, I would love to live here, and I know lots of young people in this town would love to live here, and I think a lot of them would agree with me that we want to grow up here and live here. It's a beautiful town. The community is amazing. But when we can't afford to live here, what's going to become of that in the future? And I think that's what needs to be considered with these bylaw changes. Perhaps these changes are the answer, maybe they're not the answer. Maybe building the affordable apartments that was mentioned is the answer. But I think it needs to be raised that there needs to be some answer to this problem and something needs to be done, because eventually we're going to need to find some solution to affordable housing, and I think that I just think it's really important to being able to keep your community both alive and vibrant and being able to keep those young people around, because we can and will be the core of your community, and we will buy in and be very passionate about living here, but we have to be able to do that and have the means to do so. So, yeah, thank you.
Thank you. Let's just hold the applause. Thank you. Now I'll ask if anybody would like to speak in neutral position.
Your Worship, councillors, my name is Jim Griffin and I live on 5 Van Horn, and I am here in a neutral position seeking some clarification with regard to the proposed designation of the Lot 1 on Van Horn. I and my neighbors on Van Horn have a covenant attached to our deeds that
identify that Lot 1 was not going to be built on, and in fact it was designated as some sort of a property that could be recreational land as agreed to by the residents on the street. And I just would like some clarification as to, with regard to the land use bylaw change, whether this covenant is null and void, or whether it still applies, or whether we are participants in any other designated use that this property might have. I'm just basically seeking clarification. Thank you very much for your time.
Thank you. I'll look to Senior Admin to clarify that for you. Mr. Fark?
So the covenant that you have in place remains in place. The change of land use does not affect that, the existing covenant. As Mr. Fish and Mr. Pretty much spoke to earlier, the intent here is to, sorry, Lee, drew a mental blank there for a moment. As they alluded to earlier, the intent here, the parcel is actually currently zoned, I believe it's R1, and we want to change that as a cleanup to public use district, which would further restrict the uses to which that lot could be used for. So if anything, the change is in support of the covenant that you hold against that title.
I'll look to see if anybody would like to speak now in opposition.
My name is Dr. Victoria Mitchell, and I've been a resident of Canmore since 2001. I live in a duplex on Rundle Crescent. I have a neighbor who bought the adjacent unit about a year and a half ago, completely renovated it, and then made an illegal secondary suite downstairs and rents out the upstairs to tourists. This has been going on for 13 months. The most recent 9 months have been tourist accommodation. As far as enforcement is concerned, gentlemen, I appreciate what the plan is, but it's not enforced. In addition, I'm sorry, I've already given a statement by email, so you have a number of comments there. What I wanted to supply here was what life is like for us. Okay. This unit next door has speakers, outdoor speakers, upstairs and down. I've got a hot tub within 3 meters, about 10 feet from my back door, which is also my bedroom. When the unit is rented out, and it's been rented out most of the time upstairs, I've got partying going on. Outdoor speakers, there's an outdoor living room on the deck, complete with propane fire pit. The tourists don't have really much regard for the people living next door, and I have to apologize, and I'll do that publicly to you, Mayor Bowerman, because I'm the one that wrote the letter inviting you and your wife to dinner when the tourists were next door, so that you too could experience what we were having to endure. Every time a tourist car shows up, my husband or I email Bylaw and let them know it's happening again. And throughout the summer, it has been every week. In addition, the owner has put in a set of stairs to a loft that is not in the building plan, and Bylaw has, their planning and development, to talk with Michael Fark, had indicated that that would not be allowed. They had him take it out. Within a week, the owner put it back in again. And that loft is being used as a bedroom. So this is our life, right? If it weren't for my husband's perseverance, I would have sold a long time ago. And it just destroys the fabric of this community. I'm a volunteer in a number of organizations in town. We purposely bought in where we're living, in large part because it was a community. If I wanted to live in a hotel, I would have bought elsewhere in town. But our life is just totally destroyed destroyed. And then we have the increased problem of not knowing if our lives are even safe. I can't tell you the number of times I've gone out on the deck and had to yell at the people indoors to come out and look after the fire that they left unattended on the deck. I mean, this is insane, insane. By the way, my PhD happens to be in business administration, and I can assure you that if you pass this bylaw with the accessory suites, those suites are not going to be used for long-term use. They're going to be used for the highest dollar value, and that's going to be short-term rentals. So thank you.
Thank you. Is there anyone that would like to speak now in support?
Your Worship and members of Council, my name is Megan Dalrymple, and I'm speaking in support of the proposed changes to accessory dwellings as outlined in the Land Use Bylaw. I feel the need to voice my support today because so often it is those in opposition who come out with the loudest voice. Not necessarily because that voice reflects the opinions of the majority, but because people naturally tend to take the time to speak out about a negative experience or a threat compared to those who are in support or who are neutral. I want you to hear and I want you to know that there are many of us out here who are in support of these changes. I also feel that, as with many of our controversial housing issues in town, those who speak up in opposition to these steps towards affordable housing are ones who have had the good fortune of moving to this piece of paradise well over a decade ago and likely purchased for well under current real estate prices. They see these changes as a threat to the Canmore they love. I understand and I appreciate that. We all love the Canmore we moved here for. Change is scary and change is unknown, but change does not have to be negative. We all moved here to enjoy this amazing place and community. Some of us are younger or moved here later, but it doesn't mean that we appreciate this town any less or that we have any less to contribute to this community. When we moved here, we all needed a place to live, something that didn't break the bank based on our lower income wages. We needed a place to call home whilst we headed out to participate in these amazing surroundings. That's when we first fell in love with this town. That's when we started to see this as our home, and that's when we started to nurture this place as our community. I don't have statistics to detail how many of us were not born and raised here, but who chose to live in Canmore, but I am confident that this is the story for many. And my husband and I have been permanent full-time residents of Canmore for just over 12 years. We have both been gainfully employed full-time since moving to Canmore. We are fortunate that, based on a combination of smart choices, sacrifices, and good timing, we were able to get into the real estate market in 2006 by purchasing a small apartment. Over the years, I have felt as though, despite having good jobs, we, along with many of our peers and colleagues, have been fighting harder and harder to be here, with the affordability of accommodation getting more and more out of hand. For those of us who strive to own our own home, where we can enjoy the security of home ownership for ourselves and our growing families, it often feels more like a dream than a reality. For our friends who rent, they find themselves in a precarious situation, at the mercy of inflated rental rates and of landlords who may choose to terminate the lease at any time, either to cash in on the sale of their property or who opt for the more lucrative rental option of the often illegal visitor accommodation. For those friends and neighbors and those strong and valued community members that we haven't yet met, I cannot even imagine the daunting challenge of trying to make this place their home. For them to have that chance for a place to live, something that doesn't break the bank based on their lower income wages, but a place to call home while they enjoy the amazing surroundings and while they fall in love with our Canmore. I have always been sad to think that my children likely won't ever have the opportunity to own a home in their own hometown. Now I fear that they won't have the opportunity to rent and live in their own hometown. It's my view that expanding the zoning to encourage accessory dwellings as proposed is a step towards correcting our path towards affordability. I believe that these changes will, number one, create more rental opportunities for residents of Canmore and our local employees. Number two, help to regulate the rental rates by increasing the inventory of long-term rental options. And number 3, provide a revenue source to help offset the cost of real estate, thus making the purchase of a single-family home more accessible to the average household. With the average single-family home in Canmore selling for just over $916,000 in 2016, the price of home ownership is not possible for us or many of our peers without the revenue of an accessory dwelling. The idea of providing a yard for our children, whilst also providing a rental opportunity for a local resident, sure feels like a win-win for us, and it's a goal that we strive to achieve. Thank you for this opportunity to share my views with Council and to share my support of the proposed changes to accessory dwellings.
Thank you. Looking now to invite anybody that'd like to speak in a neutral fashion to the mic.
Your Worship, Council, members of BOC staff and community, my name is Mark Eckerly. I live on the 900 block of 16th Street. I've been in Canmore since 95. Member of the community, volunteer, play in a band called Sully's Garage, played a lot of fundraisers. Feel like I'm part of this community. I think the secondary suites fill a need. I do have some concerns. Although they fill a need, I think that there's potential for abuse, and I think that there are privilege for owners and a good chance for a financial bonus. My concerns are parking. I think that we really do need parking to be included. I think most suites, there's a lot of illegal suites in town, and everyone that I know of there's cars there. The other concerns are enforcement and abuse. There are already existing bylaw violations. I'm not sure how you look towards enforcement. I have a couple of suggestions. I think that in the process of doing a development permit, or however you do it, that you should include that the owners who are going to have this financial bonus should pay for a survey. They should at that point be proving that there are no existing bylaw violations or that they are in the process of removing them before they are granted this privilege. I think they should also pay a yearly fee that would support inspections. And I heard somebody mention yearly renewal. I think if somebody's going to the expense that we saw before of $50,000 to $250,000 or whatever it was, you can't ask somebody to do that and then a year later say, oh, sorry, can't do it anymore. But I think you should have yearly inspections, a yearly chance for neighbor input that these people are required to then address if there are concerns. I think the last concern that I would mention is the concern that that the R1 neighborhoods that will be most affected are not the ones that are the most expensive and most exclusive. It's going to be the ones where people are already kind of needing to have a little bit of extra income. They're going to be in parts of the town where people would have access to I don't think they're going to be in $3 million houses and $10 million houses. I think they're going to be downtown here, and I think we need to be very careful. We've got a lot of density. One thing that you have to, I hope that you take into consideration is in any town of this kind of density, this kind of size, you have a broad spectrum of people, and there are people out there that will take advantage of their neighbors for their own personal gain. Not a lot of them, but there are some, and that's what we have to protect ourselves from. Thank you.
Thank you very much. I'll open the mic to anyone who would like to speak in opposition.
Hi guys, Mayor, Your Worship and Councillors. My name is Alistair Russell, Russell and Russell Design Studios. One of the local designers in town. I have been talking at great length with my colleagues, some of which are here, some of whom have written letters, lengthy letters to you guys. So I'd like to address my grave concerns about some of the changes to the bylaw, specifically for the suites, garden suites, as well as the driveway access. I would like to speak in support of encouraging garden suites. However, I think that the good doctor pointed out the main problem with garden suites, or of course in her case an illegal suite, is enforcements of the bylaw. This is similar to my experience of calling bylaw and saying that there's a real safety issue, is that it tends to be dismissed and passed on down the line, and nothing is resolved. So it's all very well putting in new bylaws into place to try and encourage more of this to happen, but if we're not enforcing the current bylaws vis-a-vis proper behaviour or illegal suites, then we have even less chance now as those volumes increase. So for me, I heard a couple of things at the start of Lee Provo's explanation. Apparently this is about sustainability, diversity and connectivity. And what we're trying to do here is better align the MDP, well, the bylaw with the MDP. Now, I've gone through the MDP at length and I can't find any parts of the MDP that seems to back up the directions that we're going in with these two issues. So the first one I'll focus on is the driveway issue. As Lee clearly said, we want to restrict driveway locations. The town has given no supporting evidence to suggest that there will be any benefit whatsoever to any of the 13% of homes in Canmore that have a lane and a front driveway. We have been through, before this bylaw is enacted, numerous subdivision development board hearings, as well as protracted and lengthy development permits that are completely unnecessary on the basis of the bylaw that currently says we should use the predominant pattern of access but are not compelled to. So right now, and for the last over 3 years, we have already been fighting the driveway access bylaw that the town is trying to put through just now. It makes no sense whatsoever. The time we've been challenged on it, the two concerns that were raised were safety and some amorphous idea known as eyes on the street. Alaric Fish referred to that to us in the last SDAB hearing. Eyes on the street is a phrase taken from Jane Jacobs, who was a town planner, not by training, and she wrote a book called The Death and Life of Great American Cities. In it, she was very, very clear that she is not talking about small towns, she's actually talking about great cities. So the idea that her work is being used now to try and force people to have less options. I don't mind whether someone wants to put a workshop in their rear yard or if someone wants to preserve it for their small children to run around in. But right now we have the option, even though the town is not following the bylaw as it stands, there is no reason whatsoever, safety or any other concerns that have been raised, to change this, and it in fact further restricts development and reduces the value of the lots in question. There was a lot of talk about how few people had taken up the offer of a accessory suite. We, I think, have had 3 this year accepted and within a year, and 3 refused. These were refused for very minor issues, all of which had been built previously. So the idea that there is some encouragement from the town of Canmore to create these secondary suites seems to be entirely false. We've had as many shut down as we have had supported. Removing barriers to doing this seems to be revolving around reducing the parking requirements, which just means that the people who own the property and are now forced to park at the back will have to stare out front at the beater vehicle owned by the renters that are living in the back of the property. So there seems to be many things acting against each other, and certainly there is very little encouragement from the town to allow these secondary suites to go through.
How do I turn that?
Thank you.
Thank you very much. Mr. Russell. Again, I'll open the mic to anyone who would like to speak in support.
Mayor and Council, my name is Ron Rempel, and I'm speaking on behalf of Bow Valley Builders and Developers Association. As you know, we are a membership-driven networking, advocacy, education group that focuses on the needs of the building and development industry here in the Bow Valley. We currently have 220 plus members. To arrive at our position today, BODA has consulted with our designer, engineer, builder, and developer members on issues relative to their areas of expertise. And we've also consulted with our entire membership base on the issue of accessory suites. I want to start off with that, and although I'm up here in support of the bylaw, there are some things that I'm in support of, or BODA is in support of, and some things that we're not in support of. Accessory suites, the MDP provides clear direction that the town wishes to remove barriers to accessory suites in order to create more affordable housing. BODA has supported this direction from the outset in the MDP and continues to support that direction. We've surveyed our members, and we received a 10% response rate on our membership survey. Of those respondents, 77% responded yes to the question, do you support allowing accessory suites in all residential areas of Canmore? So I think that supports what Mr. Prevost put up on his slide earlier, that there has been general support for that direction. There were some caveats to those responses, such as it depends on the controls in place to mitigate issues and placing limits on where accessory suites can be. However, in this survey, 71% indicated that the town should deal with the issue post-election instead of pre-election. Our designer members have tried working with the new regulations. Mr. Russell was just alluding to that, and have indicated that these regulations are too restrictive to provide useful living space. While we appreciate that Council wants to get this done during this term of Council, BODA recommends that Council not approve second reading of this bylaw in October. This will allow for more community input through the upcoming election, but it will also allow more time for discussion, for administration to present some regulations that will allow for accessory suites that provide reasonable living spaces while not negatively impacting the neighborhood. Should the accessory bylaw proceed, we provided some recommendations for your consideration. One of those recommendations is to require a DP for both accessory attached suites and detached suites in existing neighborhoods. Not new neighborhoods, but existing neighborhoods. And again, others have alluded to this, to allow a bit of an opportunity for the town to have control in place in case there are some issues that arise. Secondly, on green building, BODA has supported green building regulations in the land use bylaw since the bylaw brought this into effect. In fact, Canmore was one of the only, if not the only municipality in Alberta that has included green building regulations in their land use bylaw. We continue to be supportive of having these regulations to ensure that homes in Canmore are built to a higher standard, because ultimately that's BODA's mandate, is to encourage higher quality building. We believe that the new green building regulations proposed by the town of Canmore will continue to improve the quality of homes. We do have some comments and recommendations for consideration, and we have included those in our written submission, and we've discussed that with Planning Department. And as Mr. Hill indicated previously, we also recommend that BODA and Planning Department monitor the new regulations over the next year and consider if any changes need to be made in fall 2018. On the administrative changes, Section 4, the front drive access, BODA recommends that the restriction in 410.04, where a lot has direct access to a lane, the lane shall be used for vehicular access, is not necessary, and that the clause should simply be deleted. This is an over-regulation of the very small percent of homes that have lane access. There are areas within Canmore that were designed specifically for laneway access, and those have the appropriate regulations in the land use bylaw. The area that I live in on Moraine Road is one of those areas that has specific regulations pertaining to that. So we've provided some reasons for not forcing all access to the lots from the rear lanes in our written submission. Fire prevention and emergency access, we agree with increasing the roof material requirement from Class C to Class B. We live in an area that is surrounded by forest. We need to ensure that homes are built to resist the spread of fires, and balancing this with the need to keep building costs from further escalation. On environmental protection, we recommend that the wording be changed slightly just to provide some clarity.
Yellow light.
Flood Overlay District, myself and one of the engineering members met with staff from Planning and Engineering to discuss this. At first, we had concerns about the accuracy of the maps, potential unintended consequences. We had a really good discussion, and I think we've come up with some solutions that could work for everybody. And we had 3 engineers in the room. I won't go into any details on that. Thank you.
Thank you very much, Mr. Rempel. Open the mic now to anybody who'd like to speak in a neutral position.
My name is Hal Retzer. I live in South Canmore at 513 4th Street. I have 3 things I'd like to raise. One is parking. I would suggest that most people that would be renting a secondary suite probably do have a car. So I fail to see the logic behind the requirement to not provide parking for a secondary suite, because they still have to park their car somewhere, even though many would probably walk around town. So I fail to see the logic behind not providing parking. The second comment that I have has to do with the overall massing of new home construction that has a secondary suite built into it. To put it in context, we live in a 1,500 square foot house. Our neighbors also used to live in a 1,500 square foot house. They sold, that house got torn down, and now our neighboring house is a 4,500 square foot house. There's no, and which does include a suite, which is very good. But there is no doubt in our minds that the nature of our street has changed, our block has changed with one particular house that is as large as it is, albeit it does have a suite in it. So I would maybe suggest that there must be some way that new home construction that has secondary suites has a better way to control the massing of the house such that it still fits the character of the neighborhood, because the house beside us does not. And the third point I would make is when a secondary suite goes in, especially in these new homes, which, by the way, most people that build these new homes don't need the secondary suite income. And we know firsthand that in particular case, that secondary suite was built, the house got bulked up by about another 1,000 square feet, and that secondary suite, although it's being used as a rental suite now, the landowner fully intends to not have it as a secondary suite down the road. So I guess I would just ask that if there's any way that secondary suites that get put into new homes, actually if there's some way that they actually do get placed into the rental market without just being as a ruse to make the houses just that much bigger. Thank you very much.
Thank you. Now I'll open the mic to anybody who'd like to speak in opposition. Mr. Kendi.
Thank you very much, Mr. Mayor. I'm going to be as positive as I can, which I've never been in 81 years. There's a couple of observations I have. First of all, I thank you. Oh, I'm sorry. I thank you to receive me at the microphone, and I'm thankful that we still smile at each other. There is some people who don't, but I like to prove that I am not as bad as I've been said. I thank you very much for Boda, for his representation, because he said, and Boda had 2 things which proved to me that maybe what we think in the majority of the town, and I'm not speaking the majority, I think that they would think, that they had more time to study this, they're more prepared, so therefore they covered all aspects of this very, very complicated, confusing bylaw. Furthermore, I want to say, Boda, that yes, you had 4 years, fruitful 4 years. Congratulate you, Mr. Mayor, that you only get partial gray on that, because I was trying to make you all gray. But really, really, this is not an agenda for your last, or the whole council, for the last 3 weeks to do. Please leave us a good memory and some relaxation of rushing. First of all, I'd like to point it out that I'd like to thank the lady who was talking about the duplexes and how uncomfortable for her to live in an area where she lives. She pointed out the lack of bylaws and the bylaw patrolling and executing the bylaws properly. But she pointed out to you, what is the difference between living in a more dense area or in a triplex, which this bylaw does from the duplex. So that's the same thing as apply to all zoning. How complex this bylaw is, it had to have 4 sections. And I listened to the previous speakers, all of them talked from individual lot, their own neighborhood, the parking, or the density. There is lots of other good things in the bylaw, but nobody talked about the flood, which we spent, and spending $50 million, and what is that going to do to us, and what is that dealing with? And the administration took an interesting statement that this bylaw does not change any zoning designation. There is, at the present time, 13 subsections of R1. If anything changes zoning, this does, because the density of these areas will be doubled at the minimum. So the designation changed, and the reason why they don't, and call it as an amendment, because that way they don't have to inform all the people who is involved. And let me just show you, I don't know if I have time, but I can't do anything here. I will show you a cartoon here, and this is what I felt when they developed the cartoon. And this is how it went, sir. Is that what you want? This is my time. Shut up, my time. Are you on?
It takes a minute.
Well, it takes a minute, sir.
Just takes a minute.
That's a minute.
Keep talking.
I'm so excited because I love to show you my cartoon. Here it is. Focus. Now, this is one zoning where everybody will be affected. That's R1. We paid 40 years for that zoning. It's done. This is the zoning where you don't have to pay parking. There is no parking now, so you don't have to say you don't have to pay parking. You haven't got parking. This is the zoning which says the new area, which is duplex. It's been disturbed. And you talking about now that my favorite, the too rich area, which is going to be also affected, and we're talking about 450 for the route and 250 to the bus. I challenge you, and then you know everything about physical education. When you get to my age, how are you going to cope with 450 feet, 450 meters? So there is one problem, and the biggest problem what I see, and globally, please believe me, downtown utilities are not up to date. We're pumping in and refining more water than we're pumping in. Your long-range 5-year plan on utilities left out downtown because it's dangerous. Can you imagine if you make that? But somebody was stolen from me by not putting it up. No. So I just want to say that we're not going to be afraid. That's my last sentence. I am not afraid anymore about the flood, sir, because the increased density what you're creating from door to door, we have a problem of the brown stuff what we're going to drive in. Thank you.
Thank you. Open the mic for anybody that'd like to speak now in support. In support? Oh, there we go.
Hi, my name is Kaylee LeBranch. I'm speaking in support of the changes proposed. I'm from the Canmore Young Adult Network, and I'd like to bring some research and build on what Miranda was saying earlier. But first, I would like to start by acknowledging how valid the concerns brought forward tonight are. If there was a perfect solution, we would be able to solve our vital need for affordable housing without any conflicts. However, there is no perfect solution that we know of, and we aren't going to find one. But what we do know, based on the recently released research by the Town of Canmore in their Tools for the Future, Canmore's Guide to Connect People and Community, page 14, is that Canmore is following the same path as other more mature resort communities, where issues such as housing costs got so high that young adults, families, and many others were forced to leave. Businesses could no longer afford their employees, and their community disappeared, overrun by expensive part-time vacation homes and tourists. Employees are often bussed in, not even living in their towns that they work in. In terms of weighing the pros and cons, the cons are that we have to deal with some inconveniences, many which can and should be dealt with by increased enforcement of current bylaws. We'll have to deal with increased density, more cars, different looks to communities. However, the pros: we save our community from disappearing by changing the path it is on. Together, Canmore residents and Town Council can make Canmore a place where young families, young adults, average income, and low-income earners can continue to call home. This is one of the few changes to create change and new housing without clearing new lots. Anything less than what is being proposed, anything more restrictive, will lead to the slow degradation of Canmore as we know it. This is a good step forward, one of the many needed because we've let housing prices get so out of control, we are now backed into a corner and must decide which we value more. Not having to adjust to change and not having to find solutions to the inconveniences change presents, or supporting these changes that will help Canmore thrive and help ensure the sense of community we love is still here in a few years. For these reasons, I'm proud to support this motion.
Thank you. Is there anybody now that'd like to speak in a neutral position? If not, anybody else that'd like to speak in opposition?
Good evening, Council and Mayor. My name is Tricia Botch. You may remember me. I came and spoke at the Larch Park public hearing. I have opposition to this bylaw specific to the changes to R1. I do not support any of the proposed changes to the R1 residential single-family detached district as proposed. The reasons are as following. Our community has been unfairly subjected to high-end luxury development for years without key legislation to support the development of housing in new areas, housing that is designed, built, and priced for locals. The legislation that is currently being considered by the provincial government, specific to inclusionary housing, also known as inclusionary zoning, may never apply to many areas of our town that have existing area structure plans or area redevelopment plans. It seems that areas such as R1, that is neighborhoods which are not subject to ASPs and ARPs, can easily and regularly be modified by the town, while other residential areas may not. The proposed changes to the LUB specific to low-density residential communities leave existing R1 communities subject to piecemeal change over time. What additional changes to R1 residential single-family district might currently be considered by our town's administration? And what proposed changes might representatives of BODA, who are working alongside the town's planning department to complete the LUB update, which is to replace the sustainable screening report and the sustainable screening policy process, what might be proposed in the future? How more complicated might these changes become? Affordable housing form part of the SSR as affordable housing cannot be mandated at this time. I'm at a loss to know what future changes are going to be added to my community. This is not being clearly stated to the public in terms of the update and the policies and why it's all happening. Most people have never heard of the SSR or the SSP. We don't even understand that it was created to help create better development because there is no legislation, but that has a lot of complications unto itself. The Town of Canmore's Comprehensive Action Plan, which was first developed in 2008, in my opinion, based on the committee's makeup, has been too heavily influenced by the town's 3 primary resort owners at that time. This action appears to me to make existing communities comprised of low-density housing the target for affordable housing, rental housing, and possibly their employee housing. In my opinion, the town of Canmore's CHAP sets the stage for methodologies to promote the development of affordable housing that are in the best interest of the resorts rather than the town's community. Just as CHAP influenced the MDP influences the LUB update. Where is the affordable housing in new communities? Where is the employee housing in new communities? Has it really ever been built? Who purchases entry-level housing? And is it really entry-level housing for locals, or is it entry-level housing for second homeowners? In closing, I encourage the council to give thought to the following questions. Does the town's proposed changes to R1 set the stage for the relocation of non-market housing, such as PAH, employee housing, and entry-level housing requirements for new areas into our long-standing residential communities, that is, neighborhoods which predate the development of the town's 3 primary resorts? Will additional amendments to R1 be proposed by the town of Canmore, Boda within the near future as the town continues to update its LUB for the purpose of replacing the intent of the SSR and the SSP through the LUB update by December 2018? Does a homeowner in R1 have the same right to certainty as a landowner or developer in a new area? If not, why the double standard? Please do not permit the changes to R1 at this time. There is absolutely no clarity about the proposed LUB process and what future changes are going to be coming before December 18. How do I know more changes won't be proposed to R1? First, please address employee housing first and foremost, as this matter has been proposed for policy development since at least 2013. Again, it seems like the key issue to me. Thank you.
Thank you. Is there anybody that would like to speak now in support? Or in a neutral fashion? Or in opposition? Anybody else like to speak at all? If not, then we'll look to the municipal clerk to read into the... Oh.
Take long. My name is Blanca Survey, and I ask council not to approve this bylaw when it comes to second and third reading. We've had, as people have said, the public has had less than 1 month to digest these changes, which are very complex and very lengthy at 121 pages. The changes to the permitted uses in the R1 and all the other districts, to me, I don't understand why the landowners, they own those properties, they have title to them, and they're not requesting the change. You are, council is, or administration, I'm not sure. And at the end of the day, I thought that if you own property, you were the one to ask for rezoning. In this case, you are saying that these are not rezonings, but in fact, to me, it looks like camouflage rezonings. You're just keeping the same title, but you're changing the permitted use. So to me, this is the same as a rezoning. The reason I also think you should wait and not approve this in haste is that there are several typos and errors in the write-up, including in the map. There are wrong civic addresses, there's wrong legal addresses. So it indicates to me there has been haste in preparing this land use bylaw. And, you know, I don't want to repeat what everyone's been talking about off-street parking. It really doesn't make much sense. And the idea, for me, there's something in the bylaw about distilleries and breweries in residential districts. I think the commercial district from it has been dropped. And for me, the idea of having someone operating a distillery and a brewery next to my home is as attractive as somebody running an unlicensed bed and breakfast or an Airbnb. I do want to take a few minutes well, not a few minutes, but it takes a lot of energy and effort for residents to engage and participate in a public hearing. I know you have to sit and listen to us, but it's very, very time-consuming, and it's emotionally very draining. It is very sad that council does not recognize this, and that council will allow a document full of quite a lot of errors of substance to be presented to the public to provide meaningful input. The public hearing agenda was only made public this morning. It's not acceptable. Thank you for your time.
Thank you. Is there anybody else that would like to speak in any manner at this time? Nobody else wants to get up and speak? Then I'll look to the municipal clerk to read into the record the names of those who provided written submissions.
Thank you, Mayor Borman. These are the written submissions that were received before 4:30 today. Any written submissions received after 4:30 and before the close of the public hearing will be included in the record of public submissions published before the end of the week. So, public submissions. In favor, Garrett Brown and Sharon Wood, Rob Buffler, Megan Dalrymple and Matt Duggan, Ken Davies, Steve DeKaiser, Jake Pryor, and that's it. Opposed, Marianne Allen, Garion K. Anderson, Liz Baker, Teresa and George Biggie, Glynis Carling, Sheila Churchill, Carla Cummings-Sajonki, John Eade, Wade Fileski and Rebecca Morley, Tracy Henderson, Wendy and Dave Hibbard, Paul Kutzer, Emily and Adam McDonald, Shamir Patel, Kate Scott, Hugh Taffel, Jan Taffel. And in a neutral position, no written submissions in a neutral position, only verbals. That's it.
Thank you.
Oh, wait a minute, sorry. Neutral or unstated, David and Marlene Fuchs Jones and Sandra Keith. And that's it.
Thank you. Are there any final administrative comments?
No.
Then I will adjourn the public hearing at this time. Thank you for being here.